Welcome back. What's good, homies? Welcome to the Drafts and Drafts podcast. I'm Joe, aka Sultan. This is Dave, aka Disaster. It's Tuesday, April 2nd, and today we're doing roster reviews part 2. But before we do, Dave, how we doing? How was the weekend? What's going on?
We're doing well. We're recovering from being a little sick. I think we're next podcast. I'm going to be sounding crispy and clear. This one I'm still going to be hacking up a lung, but we're excited to go through the rosters. I had a lot of fun last episode, just talking. We've got a lot of trade offers going on in the league, so it's been a good time, and excited to go through the next three teams.
I love it. I definitely had so much fun last episode. I'm excited to dive into this episode. Before we do, it's time for a draft review. So, Dave, why don't you kick us off? What do you got for us today?
We got another banger. You know me, just with all the hits, and so
always banging.
So we're starting this one out with a Modelo Oro. If you haven't had it, it's basically the Corona Light, the Mick Ultra of Modelo. Pretty solid. It's, to me, one of the best light beers right now. And so here's a little crack for the show. And
it's crispy.
I'll wait for you to crack yours, and we'll sip on.
All right. So today I have the Treehouse Waffle Banger Breakfast Buffet. It's a double IPA by Treehouse, and the most impressive thing is the can art. It is absolutely beautiful. For those of you at home listening on the podcast, it is a cobalt blue wrapping with a bunch of vectorized waffles and bananas and blueberries, and I'm excited to crack into it. So I'm going to give it a crack.
That's a good one.
Dave, cheers. Oh, you first.
That's a good 4.5 star light beer. Just so easy, very crushable.
Out of 5?
Oh yeah, 4.5 out of 5.
I love that.
For the scale of what it is. Yeah. For the light beer connoisseurs, for when you just trying to lose some weight, trying not to put on the calories.
I like that. For those of you who actually have a palate and want some flavor, this is fucking delicious. I don't think I can think of, unless you're going for just a regular old plain juicy IPA, maybe this isn't for you. But my God, if you want a little sweetness to your IPA, this is just the right amount of maple. I would give this a 6.5 out of 5, a 6.9 out of 5. If we're gonna go all the way. But anyways, Dave, before we dive into the roster reviews, I liked how last time I asked you how your strategy has changed. And I like maybe we create a new segment here where we do one tough question before we get into the actual show. I'd like to call this segment One Tough Question, or the OTQ. What do you say? You open for one tough question?
Always.
So for those of you listening, I would love, if you're watching on YouTube, you can write these comments on the YouTube video, and we'll try to ask one every episode. This was one that I thought of the other day, and I'm curious, Dave, when you're rookie drafting, what do you think is more important? Finding that late unexpected breakout, not necessarily the Puka Nacua level late, but even just identifying the Rashee Rice, the T. Higgins. Maybe that's not best timing for the Rashee Rice, but finding the Tank Dell, finding the Nico Collins, finding the Kyron. Is that more important to your dynasty team success? Or do you think avoiding the big miss, like not taking the Clyde Edwards-Helaire early, or the QJ, or the Jalen Reagor, or passing on JJ for somebody else, not taking Kyle Pitts before Jamar Chase, stuff like that? Like, what do you think is more critical to a dynasty team's success?
That's a good question. I think that actually the most
a tough question, would you say?
Yeah, it's what is it? TCQ to TQC?
OTQ. One tough question. Come on, get it right.
Tough question. Sorry about that. So for an OTQ, yeah, it's a good one. I think. So let me put it this way: missing in the late rounds is never going to lose you a league. Missing in the first round will, and so I think it can go either way. I think for the first round, you can recoup that. So basically, it's kind of like there's amazing and there's like 2 goods, and there's a bad. If there's 4 quadrants, and so
You're on here.
the amazing is you nail that first round, and you find a late flyer. You can miss on your first round if you hit an amazing flyer like a Kyron, a Puka, a Tank Dell. You can then you missed in your first round, not a big deal. You can hit in your first round, miss all your late rounds, and that's okay because you hit your first round. You can't miss both, and so I think that's where the first round probably is the more important piece. And what I would say is like you will always be decent in a dynasty league as long as you maintain value in your first round 80% of the time. And so be that you're trading for a player that is still exceptional or good for 1 to 2 years minimum, or you're hitting on that rookie that's lasting you a long time. I think that what we're finding out now in our league is about the 5-6 year mark. If you haven't hit or traded for any young or good rookie sophomore players, you're now in this position where I don't know where your team goes, right? Because you might not have traded away your picks, so you still have 3 first rounds, and you could go acquire some, but now your guys are aging out. You don't have any depth anywhere to be like, all right, this guy's going to be here for 4 or 5 years, or a core, as a lot of people call it, to build around. So I think that's probably where the first round just not getting value, be it you picking the right person or getting the person that's 2 or 3 years proven and going to be there for 3 or 4 or 5 more years as a wide receiver, or 2 or 3 more years as a running back. I think that's the biggest reason you're going to fail, and the biggest opportunity. But yeah, finding that late flyer, like in our, just so they know too, our rookie draft last year, both Kyron and Puka weren't drafted in the draft, I believe. And so you have two great players that were found on waivers. And I think you in the 4th round drafted Derek Carr. And so
I did. Yeah.
You traded him. You got value for him. So I guess it was a worthwhile QB pick. If you could, if you haven't checked our league, some people are stashing 5 or 6 just bad QBs, and that's just a way they're trying to find value. And Joe found Derek Carr in the 4th round, so he's like, all right, value, we'll trade it at some point. But again, he could have had Puka, he could have had Kyron. Instead, those are picked up on waivers. Puka was in the offseason randomly on a random Wednesday. We run them after the draft. And then Kyron, I think, was at the start of the season.
I dropped Kyron during part of our cuts, and then Dan picked him up.
Yeah. So I think that's my thoughts.
No, that's it. You went through it exactly the same way I did, because so part of the reason I even thought of this was, it sounds nerdy and you're going to roll your eyes, but I'm trying to build out something in Excel that's going to help me try to identify, decent chances at breaking out, whether that for wide receivers, at least, whether they're college players based on their college production profile and all this bullshit. And I started saying, what would I rather have it do? If I can only have it do one thing, obviously I would love for it to tell me don't draft QJ and draft Puka. That would be great. But if I could pick one thing, do I want it to identify QJ as a risky profile, or do I want it to identify Puka as a potential hit? And I initially thought the same way you did, where you wanted to hit on your first round picks. But I think this is a mind versus heart, a head versus heart debate. I think the heart has a really hard time whiffing on a first round pick. But after I thought about it, I think it's way more important to identify the breakouts than it is to worry about getting your first round pick right. Because look at Trey Lance 2 years ago. Look at Traylon Burks last year. Look at JSN this year. They all face planted in year 1. Look at Sky Moore after year 1. They all retained some value going into year 2 because they had some hope. So you can take a bust in round 1, and if you decide, hey, I want to get out of Sky Moore, you could have traded him for a 2nd round pick last offseason. If I want to get out of JSN right now, I think everyone in the league would offer up their later 1st round pick for him straight up. 107, gone. 109, gone. I don't think it would be very hard for me to move off him because there's still hope. Whereas you finding that Puka Nacua in the 4th round, you finding that Tank Dell, you just quadrupled his value. He went from a 3rd round pick to being worth 2 firsts. And like, that's roster altering level value. Like, you can survive a miss in the first. You can't make up for, if Brent were to pick up Puka last year, we would have been entirely screwed as a league. Like, that is league altering level value if that can be found on waivers or found in the free agent pool or found in the 4th round of a rookie draft. So that's kind of
I do think that the Puka thing's so rare. I think Kyron is a lot more common, where people aren't having that 2nd or 3rd running back on, say, not a running back heavy team, that those are going to be waiver ads, even in some deeper dynasty leagues. So I think Puka's rare, but I do think there's plenty of the of the third and fourth round wide receivers that people just, or even for the 1 year rentals, the Damian Pierces, the James Robinson, that they're top 12 running backs for their first year, and then the team moves off them or they kind of don't continue on to their sophomore season. Those are all over the third and fourth round, and sometimes they do end up falling to waivers too. But yeah, I mean the Puka thing is, I don't know what we're gonna find in the Puka, but
No,
to
I
find the
wouldn't
tank,
say.
to find the third
I,
and fourth round tank Dells, absolutely, that's a huge opportunity for all dynasty teams to be watching out for. And I think last year, because there was so many of them, that people weren't watching in the first round and end up being exceptional. I mean, people are all over that this year, trying to be like, okay, everyone knows the top three. Most people don't say the top six, and then maybe the top three of the other positions. Who's number 9? Who's number 12? And a lot of people still are probably not checking that as much as they should.
No, and I think you're right. I don't think we're ever going to find another Puka. Like that's such a rare profile. But I think what's a lot more common is what the Nico Collins case, where you go from very, very minimal production, but really good efficiency to show that, hey, if the right stars align, this guy has breakout potential. Same with like what happened to Devontae Adams after his rookie year. Same thing happened to uh Deontay Johnson after his first couple of years. I can't think off the top of my head. There's several cases where you see a receiver showcase flashes, takes him a couple of years, whether they're behind Amari Cooper, CD Lamb. I mean, he was a lot higher profile, but he was behind Amari Cooper for his first year. And then he had Cooper Rush for half a season his sophomore year. And then he broke out. Like there's little signs that, hey, if I can see the right situation, I think that that can lead to the type of game breaking production. So like my goal would be who is this year's Nico, not who's this year's Puka. That's a lot harder to do, I think. And I don't think Puka's so unique, but like, is it Christian Watson? Is it Traylon Burks? Is it Rashad Bateman? Is it Quentin Johnston? Like, who showed anything in the small sample that I could say, oh man, they got a new quarterback, or they got their wide receiver one left, or I don't know what it is right now. I haven't been able to build anything, but I was just trying to think about what would I actually want this to do if I really wanted to make, and that's what I think I'm going to angle it towards is identifying breakouts. But anyways,
I say the challenge, honestly, and an interesting another show topic, and we can talk about that today if you want, but that is a tough thing. So I just sent a bid out for someone that I'm interested in our league, and I'm probably the only person that's asked for this player in forever. And it's also not a player that you're like, oh yeah, of course someone would want him. You know, it's like a backup running back on a team that's not a predominant running team. And I kind of sent an offer, and I'm like, I wonder what that manager thinks now. Is that manager like, what do you know that I don't know? Why do you want to take this guy for a third? That seems
yep.
like a pretty good offer. I'll just accept that. It feels like a weird thing versus the inverse, where last year, I think Brian gave up Mike Wilson to me for a third, and I was like, yep, no problem. I'll take that all day. He was offering the player for the value, seeing, okay, maybe you need a wide receiver. I'll offer you the wide receiver. You give me a pick. This is the inverse where I'm saying, hey, I'll give you a pick for this guy. No one's talked about on talk shows or even in like the top 100 conversation of players in fantasy, but I want him for a third. And it brought this weird thought to my mind where you're trying to do the same thing. And I did it a little bit last year, but I was offering more firsts for these kind of potential breakout players. Is I don't know how to have that conversation. And I thought about it in my head. I was like, should I go and be like, hey, and bring up like one of their top running backs and be like, hey, can I get this guy for a third? And he's like, oh, fuck no. All right, well, like who else could I get for a third? And then see if they're like, yeah, you can get this guy for a third. All right, great, I'll do it. You know, so I've been trying to think about the best way to poach potential without drawing too much of an eye to it. Not that they go find a ton of information anyways, but it still is like a weird dynamic that I'm kind of working through. So
I love that you were talking like trade strategy because I think we could spend a whole episode on like the art of the deal on how, especially in a home league, like if you're playing portfolio, you're playing 10, 20, 30 dynasty leagues, or you're playing with really sharp, savvy, tuned in dynasty players who follow this shit all the time. It's really hard to make angles. It's all about just send your offer. I don't know. I don't play in portfolio style, but from what I've seen watching YouTube, is it's like you just throw a bunch of shit at the wall and you hope two people accept. Um, but in our league, like there's so much to, okay, I know how Dave likes to play. I know how Dave thinks of me and doesn't want to trade with me. So he's going to lowball me, or he's not going to give me the value I'd want, even if it's a fair deal. Or I know Dan wants a certain thing, picks over the players. Like you can start creating these relationships with other teams that are like, okay, I burned the Beavers on the Travis Etienne trade a couple years ago, but I have to like, you know, kind of caress that, like, hey, I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know Trey Sermon was going to suck. Like, that was not me trying to pawn off a shitty player. It's just how it happens. Like, there's a lot of trade strategy. I bet you we could spend a whole episode on like how to get deals done, because I think you and no one would dispute that you, and probably Dan get the most deals done in the league. I think that has a lot to do with the trade strategies around like one you just mentioned, which is the old bait and switch tactic, or whatever you want to call it, the Trojan horse. But I think that's a good one, because I don't know if I've ever done it to that extent, but I feel like I've definitely been like, oh, I really want this guy. I hope we can get a conversation up. And I say, oh, why don't you throw that guy in?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is like you could do that if it is kind of that tertiary. Like, frankly, I did that with Dan. I wanted Brock Purdy. It wasn't my main guy I was going for, but I wanted Brock Purdy in a deal. And so I was like, I'm not going to offer for something for him. When we got to the conversation, I was a little bit heavy-handed on my side, I felt. So I was like, hey, if you throw on Brock Purdy, we got a deal. And that's how we got it done. I was thrilled. I then, when I knew I was getting Brock Purdy back, I was overvaluing him, because I had seen the, 13 games. This is before last season. And I was like, I like this guy. And he could flop for sure, but I had an instinct where I liked him. And so I definitely have done that strategy. Not so much where the main person I wanted to grab was Brock Purdy. It was more like I was eyeing him, and since he was on his team, yep, that's the add-in I want kind of move. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best way, especially to target some of these ancillary second, third string players. Young, could be something.
Hey, those players add up.
You shouldn't have to give up a
guys.
lot. And that's the other interesting thing too. I guess shout out to the league if you're listening. One thing I might try to do this year, like we've seen some sales of 4th round picks for like 50 fab, 69 fab for like a future 4th. If there's some, to your list point, if I feel I have some guys on a list that I'm like, oh, I'm kind of interested in these 4 or 5 guys, if I can go get 4 or 5 picks and go get 3 of them for a couple hundred fab or what, I don't know what, but like future 4th, like I might make some of those deals, because I do find that interesting. And also, to your point, if you go back to all of our drafts, I don't know if there's always a hit in the 4th round, but let's say there is one every 4th round. I'd rather take 5 or 6 shots at 1 4th round than take 1 shot every 4th round to find that one gem. And so
absolutely,
something else that I'm thinking about in coming into this draft is like, do I just try to acquire those, or like, where are people truly valuing thirds? Like, I feel like people have a clear value of firsts. They have a decent value for second. Third and fourth feel very throw-any. And I think a third feels good to add to a trade, and a 4th, people are like, fuck off. Like, I don't really want a 4th round pick.
Right. Doesn't change.
Especially you freaking you've drafted defenses before, and you hate defenses. And so yeah, there's just kind of like,
fuck you. Don't bring that up.
There's stuff like that.
I did not do that, chat.
we're really devaluing them sometimes, but there is some gold there. And again, we missed some. They just ended up going to waivers, and yeah. So anyways.
All right. No, I hear you. We should spend a whole episode on that. But that being said, we're about almost 20 minutes in. Let's pivot over to some roster reviews.
Couple of chatters.
Couple of chatterboxes. Okay. First up, the Murray Hill Kangaroos. One of the more polarizing managers in our league. Just can't seem to get away from political discourse, but we love Max. So
we've been away from it for about a year. It comes up once a year now instead of every. Although we are in a voting year, but it hasn't really come up since the vote. So I'm worried it's coming back strong. And you can see the last time we had a political year is its worst season. I don't know if that's a sign to come.
So you went 2-11 in 2020. So Max, stay off stay off Fox News.
Stay off Truth Social.
So here we go. We're gonna go through Murray Hill Kangaroos. They've placed in 6th place in our inaugural season, and since then they've come in a consistent 11th, 10th, 11th, and 10th. So this team has some work to do. I think they've treaded water at the bottom for long enough. I don't know if they've made all the right moves or put themselves in a position to make a run this season, but I think that's what we're here to kind of talk about. So I changed up the format a little bit. I'm going to go through their entire 2021 roster and picks all in one screenshot, so we can get a full view of what their team looked like, and then show their.
Can I do one caveat real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go back to the record real quick. So one other thing I do want to call out, and we'll see it in his roster a little bit. I think you're going back to 2021, but in 2020, his worst season. This manager got Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Jerry Jeudy, and 2 firsts from me, and finished, I think, last or second to last. So kind of a crazy thing to think you're going to get those players. And I believe that was the year Saquon got hurt. Or actually, I knew it was the
Yeah,
year
Saquon was
Saquon
out for
got
the year
hurt
that year.
because that's why I traded him away and I gave more
Huh.
value to get some players. But acquired Patrick Mahomes and Jerry Jeudy and 2 firsts, and you'd think that would be the kickoff of something special, and it really hasn't been.
That's such a good point. Yeah. No, I only went back to 2021, so that's a good call out. I didn't think it was worth it to go all the way back to 2020 trades and whatnot because it just most of them have almost no relevance to the current rosters. So looking at his 2021 roster, this would be funny. He had Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, Saquon Barkley and Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back. And keep in mind, Clyde was the 101 of that prior year's rookie draft. So he felt pretty solid at running back. He had Antonio Brown and Darnell Mooney at wide receiver, Kyle Pitts at tight end, Javonte Williams at flex, and on the bench he had Tony Pollard pre-breakout. He had Devin Singletary. He had a 30-year-old Julio Jones. He had the makeup of a pretty what you might think is a good blend of studs and future studs because we all thought Javonte was going to be a stud, Clyde was going to be a stud, Pitts was going to be the prince that was promised. And then you go to his picks. He didn't have his own 2022 first round pick. He had your 2022 first, which I think you ended up winning the 2021 seasons. No, maybe not. 2020 season you won.
Yeah, 2020.
So he had your 2022 first, all the rest of his picks in 22. He had only his 2023 first and only his 24 first and second. So he hadn't done much in the way of trading for future draft capital at the time. Let's look at his 2024 roster to see where he's gotten to. So now if we go through, he still has Mahomes at QB. He has Bijan as his lead back, which he won in the lottery last year. Like with the 10% chance at winning the 101, he won the 101. Javonte at RB2. He's got Debo Samuel, Chris Olave at wide and his wide receivers, and Kyle Pitts at tight end. The rest of the roster isn't much. He's got Condre Miller on taxi, Michael Wilson on his bench. Going to his picks now, he's got the 106 in this year's draft, along with the 205 and 206. He has 3 2025 firsts, and I don't have his 2026 picks on here for some reason. I believe he just has his own 2026 first, second, third, and fourth. But
he does.
Okay, sweet. So now, before we talk about what he should do, I'm going to go through see what you think. Do you want to talk about what you would do with this roster first, or do you want to go through some of his trades that have gotten him to this point?
I didn't know that was coming. So either way, whichever way you want to start, let's go.
I think this is a good exercise to show how he got here. So, and then we can talk about what to do with his roster. So you're probably wondering how he went from that roster in 2021 that had Saquon and Antonio Brown and all of those guys anchoring his squad to the current squad. Last year, he traded away Saquon Barkley for a 23 first, a 24 second, which became the 205, and Eno Benjamin. I think he sold kind of light on Saquon here. But in that 23 first ended up becoming the 108, I believe. Which he ended up flipping for Debo and Pollard. But what do you think of the value on the Saquon trade?
The tough thing was it was before Condre Miller. Like I get the mentality to have the backup to Kamara, but this was before Condre Miller was drafted. So like it kind of sucks that he did that move because if he actually imagine that was Condre Miller instead, I think we'd say probably more fair value. Unfortunately, the timing was just shitty. So because of that, he definitely lost that trade, especially with how Saquon moving to Philly, being in a much better situation. I can't imagine Nick right now accepting that trade. That would be a very favorable trade to go get Saquon for.
Yeah, it's so wild because I look at like the running backs and I'm like, there's very few running backs I think I'd want to pay 2 firsts for. And then I think back to our league is still only start 8 positions and running backs being 2 of them. If you can get that stud Saquon Barkley, that Christian McCaffrey, that Bijan, that Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan, you go get that guy. And for just a first and a second, like I know it's helped shape the way he's taken his roster, but I still think he sold short. And like we're gonna get to another trade similarly where I feel like it was sold a little short on one end, but I don't want to go through every trade. I put them on the screen. If you're watching, you can look at the trades and assess for yourself whether you think he won or lost them all. But I think this is a good way to kind of refresh yourselves. The other big one I think here is, especially because we talked about this roster before, was the trade with PME Warrior where he traded away Cooper Cup and his Bohm's 2022 first for the 2021 first that was Kyle Pitts. That was before Cup went on to win the Triple Crown, and that 2022 first went on to become Drake London. So trade away Pitts for Cup in London, Triple Crown Cup in London. That was a trade that I believe might have set this roster back. I still believe in Pitts. I just still think this was a
What
huge
was
loss
that
of
during the
value.
draft? Like when was it?
During the
Like,
draft. That was one of our few draft trades
Wow.
before the slow clock.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think that's a wild trade.
Yeah. So okay. Let's go back. I'm gonna go. Let's look at his roster. And Dave, you're looking at this team. Do you see any cornerstone pieces? Do you see any young pieces of value you might try to trade? We have tight end premium now, so maybe Pitts and Komet and Henry is too log jammed of a tight end room. Maybe get some value there. What's the first thing you're doing if you're picking up this roster?
So it's funny that he has Country Miller now. So I think that's ironic that we just mentioned that. I didn't even put that together when I made that comment.
Yeah.
I think the bigger concern I have for his team is heavy weighted in bad teams. And so he has Chris Olave and Country Miller. He has Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson. And like, yes, they're right now with Kirk Cousins going down to Atlanta should be awesome.
Should be.
Yeah, should be. Derek Carr's in New Orleans, second year with Olave. Olave's getting bigger, older, whatever, more mature. Should be a stud season. Country Miller should be an elite replacement for Kamara whenever Kamara decides to not be fast anymore. There's a lot of good pieces there that sound amazing on paper, but the Kyle Pitts experiment's been terrible. Bijan had a really underwhelming first year.
You're
Sure,
telling
new
me,
coaches,
yeah.
so many other things happening, but it's like I don't want to, like a good example. I had for a while the running backs and wide receivers for the Commanders, and they were good values, but like I had to somehow get rid of them because I had two good players, but on a very average team or below average team that I didn't justify me having two of them and potentially starting two of them. That's kind of how I feel with his team right now. And there's plenty of building pieces though, right? Like if there's things to keep, I'm keeping Mahomes, Bijan, Debo, Olave, Downs, and I'm maybe trying to change out tight end for Pitts. See what value you can get. Like last year, I traded him Mike Wilson for Jake Ferguson. I'd much rather have, even though maybe it's a lower ceiling, I'd much rather have Jake Ferguson right now than Kyle Pitts plus something, right? So like if I'm him, could you go get Jake Ferguson plus a first for Pitts? I'm not trading that right now, but like whatever that equivalent is, even Evan Ingram or something like that, like get the extra first round pick, go try to hit another home run. Someone else has Kyle Pitts. Now, if he goes off, he goes off, but you don't have two pieces that are four starters. Like Bijan's not going to start on your team. Kyle Pitts right now, looking at his roster, is not going to start on his team. So you're locked in and you're really riding that team hard that has not performed well in a long time. Sure, new regime, new quarterback, but points been made. Same thing you see here too with Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. Like you're almost over mitigating your bye weeks by doubling down on certain teams that again have not been elite. And so the only standout pieces here, right, are the Debo and the Patrick Mahomes that are on elite teams, elite players, should be great. And so everything else is kind of like, why not try to, like, I don't know. There's just so many ways you could re-roster that because you have pieces that a lot of people value. That's what I would try to go change. And like Devin Singletary should not be a starter. I don't think he necessarily will be. I mean, hopefully you're starting Mike Wilson over Devin Singletary, but I don't know. It's kind of a question mark there. So he needs another flex to probably confidently put in there. The rest are great bench pieces, and maybe he'll get that with the 106, and that's probably my guess is what he is going to get. But yeah, if I could diversify from teams and just have more shots at things, that's what I personally would do. Otherwise, there's a lot of good pieces here to like on paper. Like any of these individual pieces I just laid out, the Bijan, Mahomes, Debo, Olave, Pitts, Downs, all those on paper, you're like top 100 player, fantastic, right? Everything else is a couple question marks there. Like Javonte should be good. But you saw Jermichael Williams kind of like puttering around. You know, Sean Payton's kind of like kind of a shitty coach right now. Like, I don't know. People have viewed him so negatively after the Russell Wilson experiment. Who's their quarterback? Like, how are you going to be running a running back a ton if their quarterback and offensive play is just garbage? All their wide receivers are gone. Like, I just don't know. I don't know what that looks like. So there's like to have such elite pieces. He's almost like Brent he's like mini Brent right now, and mini Gilday, where he has some really good starters but no depth, and he had right now he doesn't even have all starters filled out
No
with really
depth.
good starters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he
This
has no.
is
He's still missing 2 really good starters to actually say that. Oh yeah, we're good on paper for at least the top 8.
yeah. This is why, like, I look at his
Wait,
team.
real quick. I just need to correct something for the chat. We start 10 people. There is a kicker and a defense, so it's a 10 starting league. It's not 8. Let's just clarify real quick. He's also
Okay.
chopping all the defenses and kickers from this, so there's a whole other depth to
Do you
this
want
that
to
if
do
you want
kicker
to.
and defense analysis?
I mean, listen, people would trade for really good defenses or really good kickers.
I know
You
we
wouldn't.
were gonna lose the 7 viewers we have if we start talking about kickers and defenses. So, for the record, to clarify Dave's clarification, in the industry, you just say the number of skill position starters is your lineup depth. They don't care about kickers and defenses. So I wanted to say that. So everything you said, some of it was actually new thought process. So I liked hearing that having Bijan and Pitts, while on paper individually they're great, I don't like necessarily capping my upside week to week by having 2 Falcons that are also. I wouldn't say Bijan's a question mark, but we saw the way that him and Algier were deployed last year. We've seen Pitts look not himself with his knee injury, and you have to think with Kirk Cousins coming, and yes, of course, he's sustained multiple options in the passing game. You have to imagine that the primary benefactor is going to be Drake London first and foremost, and then if that offense goes, Bijan and Pitts will eat too. But if that offense doesn't go, it's going to be like a B plus London and then a B plus Bijan and a C plus Pitts. So you're right. I think I might diversify off that Falcons offense if I'm him. The other thing is, you got to stop trying to tier up. Like, I know he's trying to trade the 10, probably trying to trade the 106 plus another pick to try to move up in the draft. And like you just said, he doesn't even have a full roster yet. Why are you consolidating assets? You don't have the bench to consolidate assets. And I know some people like to say, well, you can't start depth. And it's like, you can't start depth until you need to. And at least my personal philosophy is I don't like to have to ever trade from a position of need. I like to trade from a position of want. So God forbid Bijan does go down midseason and he tiered off some of his picks to go get Christian McCaffrey, and now he's sitting there without an RB2. It's like, what are you doing tiering? I don't think his roster has the flexibility for that. If I were to take over this team, I would look at those 2025 firsts and go, if I can nail that class, I can build a 2026 juggernaut. And the point of dynasty to me is to try to build a dynasty, not necessarily to build a 1-season win. And if from what I've heard, I don't know. The 2025 class seems to have a ton of good running backs. So if I'm him, I might try to trade out of my Javante, might even entertain Bijan, reasonable Bijan trades. Collect a couple more 25 firsts from whoever has them. Really stock up on that 25 class, like you said with I think Printy's team, and not Printy, the Nessies and the Pizza Rats. Try to finish in the 7, 8, 9 slot, make a run in the consolation bracket, but set yourself up for success in the 2025 draft. That's where you're going to really fill out this roster. I think Bijan's obviously the most attractive trade chip. You can probably get an unbelievable haul for him. I also understand holding Bijan. He's a generational RB. You don't trade those types of players away into one quarterback. The other pieces I would consider trading are Debo and Olave. Not because I don't like them, but Olave's, let's face it, why do we treat Olave as so much better of an asset than we treat T. Higgins and Devontae Smith and DK Metcalf? Olave's stuck in a kind of a shitty offense and a team that's in cap hell with a dog shit quarterback and a team that has no vision. And yet he gets treated as a top 10 wide receiver asset, and Higgins and DK and Devontae are treated as like top 18 to 20 assets. And I think they're probably should be closer in value, closer to that 18 range. And I think capitalize on that Olave value. I know it would hurt. I'm sure you love Olave, but you could get a ton in return in the form of future assets to tier down from Olave and pick up a George Pickens in a 25 first, or that type of player. That's
literally what I was thinking in my head. Is like, yeah, like you could even maybe get 2 wide receivers. Like, it's hard to find out the value of what you'd want, but like, for example, just looking at my team, just because I know my team so well, like I don't know if I would do that trade, but it's close. Where if I had like Terry McLaurin and George Pickens for Chris Olave, would I do that trade? It's close. Maybe yes to add a second or something like that. But like, you can have 2 starters on your team that one has potentially be top 12, one's consistently right around 24th. That's a guaranteed starter. And now you're not starting Devin Singletary kind of a thing, or you're not
Yeah.
setting Josh Downs again. Could be elite, but like still has a lot of question mark there with Anthony Richardson not having played a full season, and you still have Pittman there. Like you start to have that depth on that starting lineup that you're consistent, and then if you hit in 25, McLaurin's on your bench now, or Pickens is like your flex player. Like now you still have really good guys that are still top 24, top 30 across the board. That now you're like, oh shit, I'm good. Like,
Yeah.
but to your point, it's either drag it out and like hopefully you hit on those 2025 first, but that is a question mark, and I totally agree with the assessment. Like I would think potentially you sell one, another one too. Like Mahomes is great, but I wonder how many. I haven't done the math, but I don't know how many points you're losing for how he's performed lately since Tyreek Hill left. For how he's performed lately, how many points you're actually losing to scale down to like quarterback 8 or better? And are they even a little bit younger? Not to say Brock Purdy's at one, but like I don't know, CJ Stroud.
DJ.
Yeah, and you go get
Jinx.
him, Jinx, and you go get him and something else. Like I bet you that CJ Stroud manager's probably like, fuck yeah, I'll have Mahomes for 5 years or 6 years or however long it ends up being. Those are the questions that if I'm him, I'm looking at my team and starting to think about, or even Debo. Debo's getting a little older. Can you just even get another first for Debo? And he's been kind of this wishy-washy couple seasons of injuries / frustrations.
Yeah.
Maybe you get something for him before Ayuk kind of takes over and Debo either goes somewhere else, or I don't know. There's so many good pieces here that the challenge is on paper with just the roster he has right now, not knowing what the 106 becomes, but even the 106, say it becomes what
Xavier Worthy.
No, yeah, I know that's who he's joking. You're saying he wants to take, but say it turns into. I'm trying to think of a player from last year that is comparable to.
Was the 106 last year? Zay
Yeah,
Flowers.
perfect example. Yeah, so say it even turns into Zay Flowers' performance with still some question marks, but also like a good rookie season. Your roster is still going to be
right. He doesn't have fly week
6th, 7th. Like
he doesn't have bye week fill-ins at all anywhere in this roster.
And maybe you can limp into the playoffs. And if Josh Down hits and Mike Wilson all of a sudden becomes a stud, and Kondre Miller does take over for Kamara. Like 3 amazing things
and
happen.
No injuries happen. Like this team just doesn't make sense for a playoff run. And I also understand there's no sense in trying to tier up right now, unless you're going to trade multiple 25 firsts. Like unless you're going to say, hey, I'll give you Downs and a first for.
I'll tell you what. Okay. Yeah, where we talked about the other day with Shuckles and aka Dan wanted to tier up. Now this is the team that like if you did want to tier up, I would say okay, you can if you want to.
Yeah, with your picks,
and go buy those picks. Yeah, where Dan wanted to use it now, where his team still stunk.
Yeah,
this team doesn't stink. He does need to replace several starters, and he would still have not much depth, unfortunately.
All right, that's enough talking about the Kangaroos. Love you, Max, but that's the most I want to think about you today. Let's move on to our next team. We have the Alexandria McGibblets. This is a spicy team because I remember after our startup draft, I remember thinking this team's going to be a juggernaut. And I can't remember exactly what his team was, but I know I think he had Juju, Lockett, and Evans back in 2019, which was, they were all 26, 27, 24. Like I was like, this guy's unstoppable. So let me go through his placements where he came in 3rd place in 2019, went 8-5. Since then, he's gone 7th, 6th, 6th, and 8th. So he has been the definition of middle of the pack. Which sneakily, he's been in the playoffs 3 out of 5 seasons, but he's made a first round exit and lost this 5th round match 2 years in a row in 21 and 22. So an overall record of 35 and 33, 50, barely 500 winning percentage. Let's take a look at what his roster looked like at the end of 2021. Excuse me. So his starting lineup was, he had Dak as his QB. He had Chuba Hubbard and Myles Gaskin were his running backs. He had Hunter Renfrow, Tyler Lockett, and Brandon Ayuk were his starters, but he had Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, and Cortland Sutton on his bench. So I'm not sure. And he had Juju on his IR. So yeah, those are his core was Lockett, Kirk, Evans, and Juju. And he had all of his 2022, 2023 first had made 0 trades. So this is a manager I remember specifically going back to look for trades. Didn't even make a trade in 2021 or 2022. And his only trade in 2022 was to acquire Saquon. Relatively inactive manager, I would say, or maybe just not a risk taker. I don't know. But let's look at his 2024 roster now, see where he's at now. So he's got Dak still at quarterback. He's got Isaiah Pacheco, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs are his core running back room. He does have Zamir White and Chase Brown on his bench. And his wide receivers are Brandon Ayuk still, Mike Evans still, Tyler Lockett still, Juju Smith-Schuster still, Christian Kirk still. I'm sure you guys can sense a theme here. Hasn't done much to improve this roster over the years. For 2023 picks, he only has a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick. And then in 2025, he doesn't have his first. I know that for a fact. He made a huge trade trading away Damian Pierce and a couple firsts to go get Josh Jacobs. So I'm going to his 3 big trades he's made since 2021. One of these trades isn't his. I don't know how they got on there. But the top 2 trades are his. I'm going to go through. We already went through the Saquon trade. Let's go through the Jacobs trade quick. Back in 2022, I remember this specifically because it was on Thanksgiving Day. I was sitting down to eat turkey, and I saw a trade has been accepted. And if you know anything about me, you know that I constantly have 4 or 5 trades in my outbox at all times. So when I see that notification, a glimmer of hope comes through that it's one of mine. And I see this. The McGibblets acquired Josh Jacobs, Pat Fryermuth, and a 2023 second-round pick, which became the 201, for Damian Pierce, Kenny Pickett, a 2024 first, and a 2025 first. And that 24 first is now the 105. That's a doozy. What do you have a gut instinct looking at? It's tough to look at old trades and try to value what they were at the time, because at the time, Damian Pierce was the starter on the Texans, too.
Yeah, that's. I mean, Kenny Pickett's obviously garbage. So remove Kenny Pickett. Pat Fryermuth is good, but it wasn't that valuable. Maybe he was worth a first, but probably more like a good second. So to me, I mean, yeah, Pierce was good, and you didn't know where it was going to pan out, but he was having a good first season. And so, yeah, I think to me, this was almost borderline an overpay, but he did get the nice value back with Fryermuth and the second. So I think it was a pretty fair trade. And at the time, Jacobs was with the Raiders, and he was with potential. I don't know if he was at a holdout.
He was
there.
the RB1 that season.
That was season's RB1, and then he had a risky of holdout last year. So I mean, if you go into the offseason, he had a great 2022, potentially is going to hold out in 2023, doesn't, and now he's with the Packers. It looks amazing. But yeah, I think as a whole, it's not a bad trade.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point there about the holdout, and it actually brings up a question that one of our league mates asked, which was the Beavers asked today. How do you think about contracts, NFL contracts, when you're making your roster decisions regarding trades and making trades? Because like you just said, trading for Jacobs in a contract year, his 4th year of his rookie deal, was risky because you know that running backs have a propensity to hold out. Is that something that you ever think about, or is that something that you're newly starting to contemplate when you're trying to make decisions, or is it something that you wait for before making a decision, or do you find yourself agnostic to that and just try to say I'm going for the best player in the moment mid-season? Is it an off-season thing? Talk to me.
Yeah, so I'm much more aware of my own team, and so for my team, I might try to make that move off or on depending on what I think is going to happen. So it's not just for contracts. It's a little bit of contracts. It's contracts, but also once you have a rookie pick and kind of seeing where a team's putting value on something to go get another tight end or go get another running back, that I, for my team, am more cognizant of all that. I should be more cognizant of the whole league, but I'm just not. And so I think that's the tough thing is once you start getting into trade talks or something, you probably should start looking into that more, because you start getting into that debate of well, where if they do go somewhere else? Like what if Derrick Henry went to, I don't know, the Jaguars, and then it has ETN and him. It's gonna be a shared backfield. They always want to do a shared backfield. That Pearson keeps saying that. You'd be like, oh shit, Henry's value is a second, maybe even a third. But since he went to the Ravens, he's a clear RB1. Holy shit, he's worth a first again, maybe. So I think it's kind of things like that, where it's if it's a contract year, if there's potential to go somewhere else, how are the teams drafting, are all things I look at. But selfishly, or just what I know really well, is I track a lot of my players, unfortunately, more than I'm tracking the rest of the draft. I probably should be tracking them more to take more opportunities to go acquire some people. But again, if if I'm looking at it thinking there could be cheaper, and the other owner has no idea that's even a contract year and doesn't give a shit, the values are never going to match because I'm trying to buy him cheap, knowing he's going into contract year. The manager's like, this is stupid. And so you're probably still paying full cost if they don't value it the same way. So it really does matter as to how much your league is in tune with all those things you just kind of asked about.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of good points because it's something that until recently, like even admittedly, just hearing it from podcasts, this isn't my own revelation, but thinking about how much a contract matters towards your evaluation of a player, just in terms of comping them to other players that underwent the same treatment. So it's not to say Josh Jacobs equals Daryl Henderson or some running back that held out, but there's, if you were to look back at every single running back that had an option for a 5th-year contract and didn't get it picked up, the list of those players that actually hit in their following year as an RB2 or better is a lot. I don't know these numbers off the top of my head. I'm not going to quote them. I don't have a graph to pull up, but there are metrics out there around certain things. Like I remember hearing something about wide receivers who signed contracts with new teams have like never. This is the list of players that have signed a 4-year contract with a new team over the age of 28 or something ridiculous, some really weird, absurd contract, but it was to kind of prove that Calvin Ridley is going to be a bust. And it was like, it's not to say that Calvin Ridley isn't unique because he was an old prospect and he was had to sit out a year, but like this is just a list of players that when they didn't hit it, it's kind of a good way to look at things from a different perspective. Same with wide receivers traded while still on their rookie contract. Like you might have looked at last year and said, I think Elijah Moore is a stud. I think he's great. He was in a tough spot in New York with the Jets. I'm still gonna stick with him, even though he got traded to the Browns. It's a new opportunity. He's got a new coach. Maybe he's gonna try now. When in reality, if you looked back at the list of players who got traded while on their rookie contract, Kadarius Toney comes to mind. Elijah Moore comes to mind. Like all of those a lot of those players tend to bust. So why would Elijah Moore be any different? He's either the anomaly or he fits in with the rule. So there's a bunch of things to pay attention to. Like rookies drafted in the first round always have a 5th-year option with the team. If a team picks up that option, that's obviously a really good sign. If they don't pick up that option, that tends to be a really bad sign. And then the value of running backs tends to be very highly tied to if they get the second contract with the same team. Whereas like the list of running backs who get a second contract with a new team tend to bust a ton, like Miles Sanders or I can't think of it off the top of my head. I know there's a long list of running backs who, when they get a second contract with a new team, they tend not to do as well as the running backs who get re-signed, like your Jonathan Taylors or your Christian McCaffreys or whoever. I mean, he got traded, so it's a different beast. But Derrick Henry got a second contract with his team. Alvin Kamara got a second contract. Leonard Fournette got traded, so he's an anomaly. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's a lot about that. Let's go through and let's do what we always do. Dave, you're taking over the McGibblets today. What do you identify? Where do you begin with this roster? Initially, I thought this roster was a lost cause, but as I read off some players, I'm like, he's got competitive pieces. How does he make this team better, or does he hold back?
I really like this team. Like I wish his tight end was better, but I mean, this team could be awesome. Really, like there's so many other because the thing is here compared to what we just looked at with the Kangaroos and Max. The main difference is that they have like where Max has a couple players that could pan out, still kind of on his bench, but they're really not starters. He has starters on his bench that could still pan out to be huge, and I think that that's a massive, massive opportunity. But like right now, I don't do rankings, so just take this as like an off the cuff ranking.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd have Josh Jacobs and Saquon top 12. Pacheco's
definitely
not far behind going in the season, at least for one season, potentially even 2 seasons out. So you have 2 top 12 running backs. You probably have a 3 top 15 running backs, maybe even 3 top 12, depending on how Pacheco evolves in the season. Running back set. You look at wide receivers. Mike Evans has been steady Eddie. He's just, unfortunately, he's kind of a flash in the pan. He's more of a flex design scorer in fantasy than he is like a consistent 15-point, 20-point fantasy wide receiver 1. But he scores enough points in the season that like he should win you games. I say if there's one challenge on this team is it's missing exactly that. There isn't one wide receiver that you're expecting 17 to 20 points every week, and maybe they get to 30, but at 17 is like the floor. All of his wide receivers right now, Lockett kind of was that 2 years ago, but all of his wide receivers right now are kind of boom bust. Like Brandon Ayuk, everyone keeps saying like he's Devontae Adams, but he has never just done it, in a season. He still has Debo to contend with. Mike Evans just has these 30, 40, 50-point games and then has a 10-point game. Tyler Lockett is kind of in this limbo where we don't even know what he's going to become. And then you have the rest of them where it's, Rashid Shaheed, Christian Kirk. I like those two names as like potentials that could kind of have some sparks that come into the season, and they're decent bench players. And then same what you mentioned with Chase Brown and Zamir White. Again, they could become something. We don't know what they're going to be right now, but interesting piece is that you're already set at running back. So if there's anything here, I'd maybe swap a Christian Kirk, a Tyler Lockett, a Mike Evans, and try to acquire that projected top 8 wide receiver, top 12 wide receiver. It's hard for me in the way our league's designed and where we have some people that just have such kind of juggernaut teams, be it young, old, whatever. It's hard for me to think you're not going to win. You're going to win a season without a top 12 wide receiver that's scoring consistently and probably even top 8. And so I don't know if this team has that. And that's probably his biggest weakness, especially in a full PPR league, is that he doesn't have that. And his tight end, Goddard, was elite, had a really bad season last year. Freiermuth has had glimmers. Okonkwo has had hope. Ottens had hope. But like, you need, again, probably a top 8 tight end to be a top number, to be number 1 team in a season. So I think that those are probably the gaps there that I'd probably just try to go acquire those, maybe spend the last you have in your 2026 and add some pieces there. But you have enough pieces. Like, if you don't want to wait for Zamir White and Chase Brown, you don't freaking need them. Like, you have 3 studs, or get rid of one of your 3 starters and get a haul back. He just got
That's
Jacobs,
where my mind went.
And Pacheco, he got for $1. Like, go trade Pacheco for 2 firsts or a first and a starter. Like, I don't. That's probably where I'm taking this team. But this team is so close to being so good, and who knows where Dak lands too. Like, but I think Dak should be fine to go win you a championship in a fantasy league. It's just you need to have all the other pieces around him.
He was QB3 last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this team has the easiest direction among teams that are middle of the pack. Like, a lot of the teams in the middle can go both ways. Oh, I could tank for another year. Oh, I could go for this. I could sell off this piece and do that. This team is not winning a beauty contest. Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, Juju, they're fetching you nothing on the trade market compared to what they're going to put on your lineup card week to week. But because of this team's lack of picks, they have a very, very clear direction. This team should be doing what it can to go all in, quote unquote. I'm not saying break their team, destroy their roster, get rid of all its youth to go get Derrick Henry, but I think you can creatively push some chips in to get up there. And I think the first move I would do is decide, do I want to stick with just Saquon and Jacobs and play top heavy that way? Or do I want to stick with Pacheco and Zamir White? Meaning, I'm going to either trade one of Saquon and Jacobs and roll out with Saquon, Pacheco, and Zamir White, or I'm going to trade both White and Pacheco and just ride Jacobs and Saquon to a title. Meaning, so Pacheco, this contracts come up here. Pacheco and Zamir White are both in their 3rd year of their contract, which means, and they're both not first round picks, meaning next year is their last season, which means a lot of teams tend to draft the next heir apparent running back in year 3 of their active running backs contract. That happens all the time. Happened with Damian Pierce. Damian Pierce happened with who's a Patriots? Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, and before that it was Shane Vereen and Stephen Ridley. Like, the Patriots were notorious for drafting the next running back in year 3 of their current running back's contract. If I'm them, I'm probably just saying I'm gonna gut it out with Saquon and Jacobs. I'm gonna trade away Saquon for a first round equivalent value, and I'm gonna trade away Zamir White for an early 2nd round equivalent value. Because they are the 2 riskiest assets that could plummet to 0 in an instant. And I'm going to take a risk on Saquon and Jacobs. Yeah, they could both bust. They both signed contracts with new teams. We just went over how those running backs tend to bust. But I think they're both, like you said, they're both top 12, top 10 even running backs. I think Saquon's a borderline fringe first round pick and redraft right now. I don't know where Jacobs is going, but I'm saying I'm going to send Pacheco and not even a tier up, but just like you said, send Pacheco for your I don't know, George Kittle type or a Dalton Kincaid type. Like try to fill out your tight end slot with an actual top 6-ish tight end. You're not going to get in that top 3, but you could probably get to that 4 to 8 range. And you got to find a team that has a couple tight end. You know who's a perfect partner? The Kangaroos. Go trade for Cole Kmet right now for Isaiah Pacheco, or Isaiah
No, no,
Pacheco for
no.
Cole Kmet in a second.
Go get
Like,
Kyle Pitts.
go get Kyle Pitts. Like, go send Isaiah Pacheco and Zamir White to him for Kyle Pitts. I don't know what the trade looks like, but that's what I think I would do is I would go try to find that middle tier tight end, and I would send both of those running backs to a team that send them to the Mermen. We're going to get to in a second, but Mermen currently have 0 running backs. You send them 2 running backs that are both young and have promising, and you get back maybe the 108 or whatever. You might be able to get the 108 and a 208 back from Bohm. And now you can fill out your roster with some youth, or you go get DK Metcalf. Like you can do something creative with those 2 running backs. That's the one thing I would do. This team is clearly, you're not going to get value for Mike Evans. Don't even try to trade him. You're not going to get value for Lockett. Ride this team to the ground. And you know what? 2026 comes around, time to rebuild. That's when you say now.
What's his record again?
All time 35 and 33. He was 9 and 5 2 years ago and 7 and 7 last year.
And that's the problem with this team. That's what I was going to say is like this roster is a better version of the Kangaroos, has a lot of really good pieces on paper, is missing something elite that's going to like a good example. If my team had, I'm really blanking right now. Say my team only had Henry and Eckler, right, as my running backs, like my team would really struggle because I don't have elite. Like, say Henry's going to be 12 and Eckler's going to be 18 this year. I don't have an elite running back. My quarterback, maybe it's Brock Purdy. He was 6 last year. Hopefully you can maintain, but like, even though I have a lot of good pieces, there still is I wouldn't have a top stud, at least on paper, going into the year. I'd have promise, but like, and some hope, but that's kind of exactly where we are here. Like, there's just, it's an updated version of the Kangaroos. But the Kangaroos, I think, are just 7 or 8 missing the playoffs. This team's 4, 5, 6 in the playoffs. But I'm going into that matchup with not a whole lot of fear. It's like, okay, maybe Mike Evans can go over 50, but I'm not projecting that. Maybe Saquon can go over 30. I'm not projecting that. And like, that's kind of what you're going in with is like, there's just not a lot of fear of like, holy shit, their actually floor is 120 points. The floor is probably like 100. And it's like,
a lot can go wrong with this team, but I think, like you said, they don't have much of a choice. They can't decide right now they want to break it down and rebuild. They're not going to get the assets in return. The only tradable assets they have really are Ayuk, Saquon, and Jacobs for really top tier draft capital. Pacheco and Zamir White are, they're good pieces. I think you're going to get more for them now than you will this time next year. And that's why if you're going to make a push with anyone, I think those are the two assets I would trade both of them now and really quote unquote go all in. I would shallow out my RB room, go shore up the positions I need, which is I think flex 2 and tight end, and just go for it. But yeah, like so let's go on to our last team. I've been so excited to talk about this team. This team's one of my favorite teams in the league. Drum roll, please. The Chelsea Mermen. For those of you looking at the graphic of this team's career record, it is ugly. I normally wouldn't go through this, but let's take it from the top. This team started out 2-11, 12th place. Change of ownership. New owner Brian Bohm takes over. They go 3-10, 12th place. Make some boneheaded trades, some bad luck. Next year, they go 3-11, 11th place. The following year, 4-10, 12th place. Until last year, on the last day of the season, by a half-point loss, they go 7-7 and just barely miss the playoffs. They get a 9th place finish, but this is a team that I'm so excited to talk about because this is a true, by no fault of their own for the most part, tear down, rags to riches story. The tide is rising for the Mermen, and the rest of the league's about to drown because this team is on the come up. So let's take a look at what their 2021 roster is. If you tuned into our pilot, we kind of touched on this roster once before, but in 2021, their starting lineup was Matt Stafford at QB. They had Trevor Lawrence and Kirk Cousins on the bench. They had Jeff Wilson and Rashad Penny, Nyheim Hines, and Cam Akers were their running backs. Back then, Cam Akers was still thought of as a top running back. He was a second-round pick out of Florida State. He was supposed to be a stud, best running back since Dalvin. Their wide receiver room was Michael Gallup and AJ Green with Jerry Jeudy on the bench. Their tight end was David Njoku, who had yet to catch anything but a cold until this past season. So I wouldn't say much about that. His draft capital was he had a 2022 second, no first in that year. He had a 2023. He had 2023 first through fourth, including an extra second, and then he had all of his 2024 picks. Fast forward to today. And this bravo. This team's come such a long way, and I'm so proud of it. Their starting quarterback is Trevor Lawrence with Kirk Cousins on the bench, or vice versa. They've got Gus the Bus Edwards and Alexander Madison are their running backs. His wide receiver room is Puka Nakua, Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison with Jerry Jeudy and Romeo Dobbs on the bench. Their picks are plentiful. They've got the 103, the 108, 207, 209, and a couple thirds. They have 2 2025 firsts and 3 2025 seconds. This team is, if they're not ready to compete this year, 2025 is their freaking year because they are a couple running backs away from having a sturdy lineup and hitting. If the 103 becomes Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, or Rome Odunze, and they hit the way they're supposed to hit, this team's going to have a scary plethora of depth at wide receiver. All they really need after that is, obviously QB would be nice. I don't think T-Law and Kirk are really leading teams to championships, but I'm not sold out on T-Law yet. So how did they get here? After you saw that they had one first-round pick in the next 2 years and nothing else on this team worth trading in 2021, how did they get to the roster they have? Let's go. Let's look. I'm bringing up some of their trades, and I want to go through the big kahuna, the Cam Akers trade. This is off-season 2022, right before the season started. The Mermen traded away Cam Akers and their 2024 second and got back in return the Turtles 2023 first, 2024 first, and 2025 second. That 2023 first turned into the 102, and their 2024 first turned into the 108. So, and Cam Akers has exploded both Achilles since then. So this trade is legitimately the haul of all haul. This is the type of trade that gives managers PTSD. The Turtles must have scabs from the wounds of this type of trade because this is the type of trade that nightmares are made of. Anyways, same drill. Well, you're taking over this team, Dave. I see a ton of assets here worth building around. I see a ton of future assets. I think there's some openness in the bottom third of the playoff spots. I think every playoff spot's up for grabs, but I think there is definitely not a firm top six. Do you take this? Do you try to make a run? Do you take it one more year in the tanking again? I feel like this team's got to be sick of not making playoffs. They're one of the only teams in this league, might be the only team who's never made playoffs. Did they make a push this year?
All right. So I'll tell you what, the most exciting team to watch for the actual NFL draft is going to be this team because Alexander Madison is not going to be the starter. Gus Edwards probably not going to be the starter. So now I don't think he's a starting running back. And I'm trying to look at his team right now to see what else he has.
Yeah, I told you I trimmed everything.
I know the running joke is Samaji. So, I mean, maybe Samaji may be a starter. I don't know.
Is he available?
Yeah, he's available. No, but in all seriousness, I don't think there's a reason to go to the playoffs this year. And I mean, if I'm wrong and Madison reignites and he is a starter for the Raiders and Gus Edwards, they don't draft another running back and he is a starter for the Chargers with Harbaugh, sure. Maybe there's a fighting chance there. But I got a lot of question marks on one. Well, I guess the questions too would be like, what are they taking in the 103 and the 108? How do those pan out? I think you and I would probably bet they're not getting a running back in those two picks. If the Chargers do take a running back, could they take it with one of those two picks? Sure. And probably will be 103, probably the 108. 103, I'm hoping he's going to be taking a wide receiver. That should show up as wide receivers a little bit because there's a lot of concerns kind of throughout the team, right? Like Zay Flowers, will he take the next step? I think so. So I say, okay, Zay Flowers, call him top 24 startable. Like at worst, Terry McLaurin. Great. In. Puka, in. top 12 is our expectation. DK, top 18 expectation in. Jordan Addison, I don't know. Like, huge curveball. I still don't even know who the quarterback is. So, no. Jerry Jeudy, no. I think if there's one kind of question mark, but again, don't know who the quarterback is, Marvin Mims. I don't know. So there's like pieces, and that's where it's actually interesting. If I'm him, I don't necessarily need to go acquire more picks. I might try to go acquire a couple players because this team is so young. And not saying you're going to probably give up Puka. If you got a crazy haul, maybe you would if I'm him. But what could you get from Marvin Mims? And this is almost that same thing. Like, could you go trade Marvin Mims for Chase Brown or Zamir White and take a shot on them to like have them build to the future? Should you go try to acquire a Pacheco or someone who has 3 running backs, get a startable running back for a year if you actually did want to push? But I don't know if there's enough pieces here to kind of what you said, like that can really get it done. Now he has a lot of draft picks, and so I'll be curious what he can try to make of that. Can he get a quarterback that is better? It's funny too. The Trevor Lawrence, I just went and checked him. He was the 13th compensatory pick for the first round that we gave him when he first took over the team. So pretty good compensatory pick that he made there, in my opinion, to get T-Law, even though to your point, he hasn't quite panned out. So yeah, I think there's a lot of promise. I think it's almost like what you had said, use this year to build into it. I'd also say too, with some of those picks, if he's not going to get a player that's going to be to what we kind of said before, right? Can you get the late value pick versus the first round not fuck up? If he has any concern that he's going to get a QJ or a Clyde Edwards or whatever it's going to be in the first round, go let someone else make that pick and go get a stud player with that first round pick, since you have so many. And again, you still have 2 more first rounds in next year's draft that if you wanted to go acquire the other starter to fill out your roster as you see how players settle in to start the season, and in week 3 you go acquire someone, do it. But it worries me that he's not going to have that depth, and even tight end's not really serviceable. Like Njoku could be good. He's had flashes lately that he could be great. But I wouldn't say he's, even a lot to be top 12. He's fringe, but I wouldn't say he's a lot to be top 12. So all of that, yeah, I think he's got a lot of wide receivers that people would want to go get. And I think that he's in an interesting situation of how much does it cost to get a running back? And the funny thing was too, I hadn't thought about it until I saw some of the trades since we've been reviewing them. Austin, which we talked about on the podcast, but if you know Austin of the Turtles, they are notoriously bad traders. However, I've never thought about using it the opposite way if they want
bad
somebody.
Trade valuers.
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I've never viewed it that way in my head. And until I've seen all these trades, I'm like, wow, they make a lot of like very expensive trades because they value them the way they value some of their assets. They're like, oh yeah, it's a top 12 guy. I'll pay you 3 firsts for him. And it's like, all right, let's do it. And you're seeing some of these other managers take advantage of that, which is huge. And I'd say if Austin wants one of your guys, get the 3 firsts and run. Not that Austin's a bad manager that he can't value a player, but if he's willing to pay it, that overpay is worth it to you to go get those other prospects, no matter what your team build is. And so, yeah, I think what Brian's done and what's happened in the last 2 years has been awesome. Because even if you take away the Puka thing, because Puka was kind of a fluke thing, just even building with DK, Zay, Jordan Addison, pre-Kirk Cousins moving, Marvin Mims is still a questionable, could be great. Dobbs is still questionable, could be great. T-Law's questionable, could be great. Like, there's a ton of pieces there that, again, we touched before, as hope and promise. So, yeah, I think kudos to Bohm and what he's been building out. I would try to build as competitive a team as I can, to your point, to then push in 2025. But if I have some picks this year I don't really want to take, sell them for what you can and move on from that. And hopefully you're adding some depth, or maybe a junior player, senior player that's 3-4 years in that you prospect is going to be good for the next 3 or 4 years. And then you have a little bit more depth and personnel to play around with.
Yeah, no, I really like that. Like you said, this team's been the most impressive team in the league to watch so far. And now I think they've gotten to a point where if I was them, I'd be worried about squandering it. Like, I've gotten this far, I don't want to fuck this up. Like, I'm right on the edge. So the question remains, if I'm this manager, if I'm taking over this team, is how much longer am I willing to commit to this rebuild? Because I think you and I both know, I think Brian knows, I think every manager would probably say, if you can commit to 1 more year in a rebuild, you're going to go into next year with presumably 2 top 6 picks in his own and Dan's. And it's supposed to be a strong running back class. You fill out the rest of your running back room next year's draft. and you're hit the ground running, guns blazing in 2025. That being said, that's not the only way to do this. Like you said, if you're worried about missing on picks, there are cheap ways to fill out that running back room right now. Yeah, I think I would guess from what it seems like, this running back class might be weak, but I bet you we have three first round running backs in the rookie draft. So I'm going to guess Bohm might get one at the 108. Depends on what happens.
Brian, hey, listen, he can come by CMC, Derrick Henry, and Jake Ferguson right now if he wants.
There you go.
He has all the pieces, and he'll have a startable running. Well, he could go compete for the championship this year by adding those 3 pieces. And his fourth flex might be a little questionable, but overall, I think you are a top 4 team. You add those for one more season. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna do anything else beyond that with CMC and Henry. However, you could go acquire that type of player now to fix your running back room and kind of guarantee this year preventing injury to go and like, all right, this is the fucking year that we're going for a W. But yeah, you're 100% right on that.
Yeah, I think like we were mentioning, so the first one would be just sit pat, let your value accumulate, play for 2025. That's the path of least resistance. At least if you get it wrong doing that way, no one's going to follow you. No one's going to say, "Oh, you made a bad move there." They're going to say, "Yeah, he was committed to the rebuild. He waited till 25." And then if he whiffs on picks, it's like, "Well, at least you tried. You did it the right way." There's also, like you said, he could pony up some of the future firsts and go get the guys we've talked about earlier, the Isaiah Pacheco's, the Saquon Barkley's.
Same question
who are
for
all
Nick.
still young. Like they're still young play. Like Saquon's 26, Jacobs is 25. It's not like you're buying 29-year-old Derrick Henry, and I think you could probably get them for a combination of 2 firsts and a second,
or even if you can't buy.
DK.
That's a good point. Because even if you can't buy both, buy one from Nick, buy one from me, and now maybe you even get better value out of that. And now you have one that's kind of more prime in their career, one more back end. Yeah, like that's another key area that if he can compete that way, 100%.
Yeah. The other option I had in mind was, let's say there are 2 or 3 running backs in the first round this year that he really likes. Well, right now he can only get one with the 108, but he can certainly trade the 209 and a future first to move back into the first round and go get, if he wants Trey Benson, I'm assuming he wants because he's from Florida State. Great. You could also trade the 207 and Dan's 25 first and go get the 106 because Dan's 25 first is going to be top 6 next year. And I know that in his head, it's probably like, oh, I don't want to give up a potential future top 3. It goes back to what we talked about last episode about, at least the way I look at it, is you can't be afraid of giving up future value for the sake of competing in this season, which means, you might give up a top 6 pick next year. But if you can go secure the 105 this year from Austin and go take Blake Corum because he's a starter on Minnesota or wherever he gets drafted to, like you can go do that and probably net yourself 2 starting running backs who are both 22 years old in this draft, along with Ruma Dunze. And now his team is like a cohesive unit all around the same age, the same contract lengths, the same time horizon, skill horizon. And the other option would be spend those second round picks on kind of cheap running back options. Because like right now, what are you hoping to get out of the 207? You're going to get either Tank Bigsby, maybe like Zamir White, like a guy that could Chase Brown. Like, you're going to get a handcuff that you're uncertain about. Or what if you just went out and bought a real life handcuff right now? You go buy AJ Dillon or someone that you're more confident in. It's the same shot in the dark. Or you go get someone more
Elijah Mitchell.
Right. Go buy Elijah Mitchell. Go buy someone older. Maybe you get Joe Mixon for the 207. Like you can go get a 28-year-old running back who doesn't have much left for a second, and you can fill out your running back room to be competitive this year. Those are the 2 options. Is the 207, 209, 303, 309. Those are probably going to be all very similar players. Why not take 2 of those picks and then ship 2 of them off for? I would go get Zamir White. If you get Zamir White for the 207, that's the type of running back that right now he's the starter. He could get killed by the NFL draft, but if he doesn't, he's going to be worth a first.
That's a key piece too that I would say like.
But if you wait till after the NFL draft,
I know, but that's the thing. I don't know if our league values it that way. Like, I don't even know if Printy knows that Zamir White's a risk. Like, I don't even know if he knows,
or vice versa. He might just see him as the starter and say, "I'm not selling him for a second."
Or he might even know he's the starter. He might just know, Zamir White. Like, I don't know. Yeah, sure, you can have him. Like, I have no idea what that value is going to be. But yeah, to your point, like, this is also where it's a huge stopgap of like, what is the knowledge of that owner? Like, what do they think of them? And where you almost need to have those discussions sometimes because, yeah, right now, Zamir White should be cheaper than what it's going to be after draft if they do not draft. If they add a
Right.
running back, Zamir White's value should plummet because you don't know who the starter is going to be. And 100% that like 207 for Zamir White should be probably a
Pretty
done deal.
close. Maybe
Yeah.
207 and a third for Zamir White and a future third. Like that type of trade. Or like, I there's probably a ton of players like that have opportunity or have a chance before the draft that are still cheap. Like Pacheco's not cheap, but that's another running back that, are they going to draft another running back or not? Like stuff like
Mhm.
that where you can take a risk now or you can wait, of course, but then you have to pay full freight for guys that have better opportunity. Like this time last year was the time to buy Rashad White because everyone said the Bucks are probably going to draft someone. And if you had a chance to buy him pre-draft, now was the time you could get him for about early second, mid second, because he had a good end of his rookie year, but there was obviously all speculation. Oh, they're going to draft someone, and then they didn't, and he was wheels up. His only competition was Chase Edmonds, and it was like this guy's now worth a late first, like be just by virtue of opportunity. Obviously, he has to earn any future value, which he has, but that this is where you can earn a ton. If Bohm had come to me last year with a second for Rashad White, I might say, yeah, you know what? I don't want to risk him getting killed in the draft because if they had drafted, Zach Charbonnet last year, bye bye Rashad White, he's gone.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and now
Exactly.
he's so like these are the times like you could take calculated risks on players, or even just go get handcuffs that you like better than this year's potential shitty running back class. But
And that's a whole layer of like more advanced thinking that I don't know how many people in our league are thinking about. Their own teams even included. Like never mind thinking about other teams and other players, just like their own teams and being like, oh, is that a risk? I don't know. Like it's funny to think about, but yeah, I hope we start elevating to that.
yeah, I hope so too. I'm really hoping. I think I want to conclude with this with saying that I think that we did this show achieved everything we wanted it to. I think over the weekend we saw a flurry of trade offers, not a ton of accepteds, but I received 3 or 4 trades for the 101. I hadn't even received a single offer since the lottery until that. I know that I made a trade. I know that there was a couple other trades that went down. I know people are thinking, and I think this is really helping. So I'm really glad we did this. I think it's a really good way to get our league going. And if I recommend any of you guys who are out there that have your own home dynasty league, that maybe you're going through the same thing where people aren't active, doing stuff like this helps not only promote um, people to think about their rosters differently, but also throwing out these trade ideas that we're thinking of, even though they may be reluctant to do the exact same trade because they want to take credit for it. It's still going to get them to think, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Like I never would have thought of trading Bijan right now. He seems like the untouchable piece, but maybe like when I traded away Christian McCaffrey when he was 24, and it paid off. But like it could have been a huge risk. And like that's the type of deal that sometimes you have to evaluate and say, is it worth giving up the number one player in all of Dynasty to go try to spread my assets out and really rebuild the farm? Or, some of those ideas that you may have never thought of, like, oh, I never really thought of that Zamir White could be a value right now. But so Dave, thanks for well, actually, before we go, I did have one last slide to go through. Speaking of trades,
Is it one easy question?
no,
OEQ. Oh,
it's
okay.
our 2 trades from this week, and I wanted to get your thoughts on them. So the first trade, we'll do the easier trade to process, was one team traded away the 112 and Amari Cooper for the 109. This is one quarterback, keep in mind. So what are your thoughts on just in a vacuum, not team constructs aside?
Yeah, I think it's not bad. The 3 pickup move. I mean, I know. The team comp does kind of matter because the person trading away Amari Cooper didn't need him, so it's not like there was actually a firm value that you thought the best wide receiver is going to be at 109 and not available to you at 112 or whatever that looks like. However, knowing again that it was something that wasn't a integral piece to your team, I think the moving up, I think it was borderline an overpay. But again, to what we just talked about, Jerry Judy's went to Cleveland. There's a lot of question marks there. How is Amari Cooper going to build into the team? How much is Njoku going to be played into once Deshaun Watson's kind of like has a full season going? So I think from a risk standpoint, it's maybe it's the overpay, but he's older. It might just work out perfect. So I really like that trade. I thought it was all around pretty fair. Again, maybe a slight overpay to jump up only 3 spots, but depending on who you get, could be totally worth it. Or if you can
Yeah.
package something else, again, it all matters.
Yeah, it was exactly. So my thought process here was for the listeners, this was my trade. I traded away Amari Cooper in the 112 for the 109. So Amari Cooper is now officially crowned as the most traded player in our league. That's the 6th time he's changed teams since 2019. And
Is it the most unique teams though?
And I don't know. Yeah, he has to imagine so. He's been on Dan's team, mine team, Brent's team, and now
Oh, he's on
T-Bone's
Brent's
team.
too. Okay. Yeah, it probably is.
So my thought process was, I've been trying to trade Cooper now for a full year plus for a first. No, even adding to Cooper to get a first, couldn't get it done. Trying to trade Cooper for a couple of seconds, couldn't get it done. I was like, okay, what would be the equivalent of Amari Cooper's value as a second in a move up? And I'm like, the 112 plus a future second probably nets me like the 109. So I'm going to try stuff like that. So I actually offered a very similar trade as that to the 107, 108, 109. But it was to get a third back in return. And T-Bone countered, took the third out. And I was like, you slimy bastard. Fuck you, I'll take it. So that was my logic here is, like you said, I don't necessarily need Amari Cooper. I didn't want to give him away, but the 109 gives me flexibility to get in the range of two things that I think could be there, which is I think RB1 or QB1 will be there at 109, one or the other. I think either our draft is going to take Caleb and Jaden Daniels before the 109, or they're going to take Trey Benson and Blake Corum or Jonathan Brooks or whoever ahead of that. And I'll have my pick of QB1 or RB1 or one of those assets that either I'll take for myself or maybe on the clock, somebody will pay me more than Amari Cooper's value then. So that was my logic was maybe then the 202 will offer me their 202 and a future first for the 109 and a future second. And then I'll say, yeah, I'll happily move down 6 spots to pick up a future first. That was my logic. I don't know if it's going to pay off. I could lose. It was a risk I was willing to take. And so here, the other trade, which is a bit more tough to process. So keep in mind, we are a 1 quarterback league. PME Warrior traded away Michael Pittman. And in return, he received the 208, a 2025 third, and a 2026 second. Let that sink in.
It was just awful.
Pull up the graphic of a sink standing outside a door. Let that sink in.
Yeah, I think that I think the toughest thing was, and maybe this is overexposing Dan's trade strategy, so I don't want to give away too much. But Dan sent me a 3 second round offer for Pittman, and he said this is the lowest offer I've sent out thus far. And I said, well, okay, and I'm like negotiating. So 1, I know that's not your lowest offer you're willing to accept, but 2, I'm like, I also went back to him as a friend, not even as a competitor, and I said, Dan, this is a terrible trade offer. I said, I should accept this because this is just garbage on a paper. And I said, you're not maximizing this player's value in any capacity. I said, I know you have fears that potentially, Josh Downs or whatever, or Richardson, but trust me, either during the draft, right after the draft, before the season, Pittman's still going to be valued top 18 probably, even in redraft.
In 1 quarterback especially.
Yeah. And so I was like, let's let that value marinate for a minute. And it's like, I tried to put the rationale of you're selling a house. Okay. Just because there's only one person willing to offer you $300,000 for your $400,000 house, you're not going to fucking take it. You're going to let the house list for 30 days, 60 days until the house sells. And I was like, no one's going to play football till September. Nothing literally is going to change until maybe you get to the preseason and they're talking about the way they're playing together. But realistically, nothing really truly matters until you get to the regular season. And so I was like, you have 5 months to let shit play out and marinate, and you're just going to rush into it. And I said, don't do that. I said, and I said also, my value is very different from the other 10 guys. Flush it out to everybody but don't force it on them. Just say, hey, Pittman's available. If you're looking at your team, you need a wide receiver, Pittman's here. And we just talked about 2 or 3 teams today that probably should have gone and paid for Pittman because they need a fucking flex wide receiver. If Pittman was your 4, that's an amazing 4 on your second flex in our league. And it's if you could have got it for 3 seconds, it's a fucking steal. Even if there is any risk you want to put on him for Richardson or Downs or whatever, but everyone says there's risk for stupid fucking wide receivers all the time. It doesn't mean it's actually real. It's all smoke and mirrors until it's real. let it either become real or get your fucking value. I don't know. It's just like you try to help Dan, and again, he has been until last year he was the second most winning team in our league. So I had to let a lot of my trade criticisms die because of those things. We're getting to a position where he's going through this rebuild, and I think he's fucking a lot of it up because he's trying to do shit immediately, which you do that when you're trying to build now because you can overpay and do stupid shit. In this scenario of rebuild, you really can't do that. It started last year with his trade to you. We reviewed last show, and this is just another example of like you let other people control the narrative instead of you controlling the narrative, and he fucked it up.
Yeah, this you hit the nail on the head with the whole idea of just because you say someone's for sale doesn't mean you take the best offer. And it's this weird incessant need for picks over player values that's also driving a lot of this. Like I know for a fact if he had just shopped Pittman for I know we keep saying this name, but a Josh Downs type plus a second, to me, Josh Downs is worth way more than the 208. So he could have gotten Josh Downs in a second, but to him, it's this weird, like, well, Josh Downs isn't going to help me win in 2026 when I want to win. So why I don't want any player. There's no player I want right now. I just want the pick. And I'm like, you just left a Michael
I
Pittman
haven't.
straight up worth the 106 right now.
Yeah.
If he were to go to Austin and say, I'll trade you Michael Pittman, he should be able to get the 106. And if he can't, I understand that not every team wants to add that. Austin has this delusional view that DeAndre Hopkins is a wide receiver one and that Keenan Allen's a wide receiver one. And it's like Michael Pittman's better. Okay, I guess Keenan was a wide receiver one last year, but like his team needs a wide receiver too. Or like there's other teams like Max's team needs a wide receiver. I understand not everyone wants the 26-year-old receiver. They want the 21-year-old receiver, the sexy pick. But like Michael Pittman should be worth about a mid first or a late first and an early second or a first and a second and to sell for a late second and a 2026 second. It's just this weird like I really want to get all the 26 picks and I'm willing to stop at nothing to get them over like, okay, I can't get the value I want right now. I'll wait for the right value or
Right.
God forbid packaging for a player in a pick. I don't understand.
I know. And that's actually that's a great way to put it too. I didn't know he was so against players. I just knew like my players are older, so we weren't talking about players much and we're discussing him. But yeah, like if you're actually afraid of Josh Downs, go fucking buy Josh Downs with Michael Pittman and get an extra like I don't know if Bohm would do that, but again, I just mentioned how young Bohm's team is. I probably would have done that if I'm him because I'm going into the season with a wide receiver 1.5 that's going to be somewhere in my top 4, probably like wide receiver 3 on your team between maybe Zay and Puka or somewhere around there. And like you give up a second, and Bohm has so many fucking picks, he doesn't care. And then he removes the risk of Josh Downs. And then if Dan thinks Josh Downs is the future, like the risk, he wants to take the risk on to get younger, whatever, like fine, fucking go do that. But like, yeah, I didn't know that he was so against players, but like, yeah, that's a great way to be looking at it. If that was the risk, go fucking buy the risk. And then you don't have any risk.
And that wasn't even the intent. I didn't even make that connection. That's such a good point. But like, it depends on the direction Bohm wants to take his team in. But in every scenario, Pittman should be worth more than Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. Why not make the offer of Pittman to Bohm for Jordan Addison in a third? And I understand Bohm might say, oh, I really want to build my team the right way, the wrong way. Like, okay, it's been long enough, man. Like,
I feel like he's so nervous about the Jerry Judy thing. He's like, I don't know how to value these 30-year guys.
Go get Jerry Judy in 2 seconds for Michael Pittman. Like,
no,
why?
Don't do that. That's actually.
I'm saying that's better. I'd rather do that than the 2 seconds in a third. Like,
yeah, at that point, just fucking take the first. I think first.
I know he shopped for every first in the league, and there's no way. My guess is James didn't answer, and then everybody else said no.
But there's no way. Again, if you're looking on paper, to your point, even after the 106, a 107 to a 112, that he couldn't get one of those for Michael Pittman. Maybe it's not this year. Maybe it's 2 years out. I can't fathom that everyone's going to devalue Michael Pittman that much that they wouldn't pay a first for him.
Yeah,
shit. I would. And here's the thing, Joe. I try to like allude to it without like collusioning it, I guess. But I try to be like, dude, wait till the season, because I guarantee you, if one of my guys got injured in the first 2 weeks and Pittman's rolling, I'm giving him my 2027 firsts and maybe even a second for Michael Pittman. And instead, it's just like he's gone.
Or imagine imagine Tank Dell or Rishi Rice or someone gets hurt, or right now, under this uncertainty right now, there's a world where, and I don't know, maybe this is a trade you would make. Would you trade Rishi Rice straight up for Michael Pittman right now, given his uncertainty now with the whole arrest? Maybe he's going to sit out for half the year. I don't know.
It's a question of, right. It's a
and
very valid
get
question.
a 22-year-old player with upside and it's like, but there was this weird obsession with getting the pick that I think really dictate. Sorry, you guys close. There's this real obsession with him, weird obsession with him getting the pick that dictated the way this trade went. But hey, what do we know? Dan's already made it to three top threes. Maybe he's gonna take the league by storm in 2027. I don't know. I doubt it.
think
He's not gonna.
I
He
think
can't
what's
build out a
gonna
full roster.
I think what's gonna happen. So the tough thing is, well, I guess I don't know. Here's the thing: if he actually shopped Pittman for a first, and truly no one valued him at that, then that means there's a lot of other players in that same tier that are worth less than a first to all of our other counterparts, or you could easily go get for a first, which is
I think it's
interesting
the
to think
teams
about.
that could use him don't have their firsts, and the teams that have firsts
Interesting.
don't.
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
like right now he came to me with it, and like truthfully I was like, damn, this is a good offer, I should accept, but he'd be my wide receiver 7 or wide receiver 6. And it's like,
Yeah.
to me, the flexibility of having a first to trade mid-season matters more to me than having Michael Pittman coming off my bench right now. So
Right.
that's
And
why I
that's
didn't accept it. But like
like I would have
Matt,
given. I mean, I don't know if I
Max
would
would
have
have been a
given.
perfect one. Oh my god, I don't know why Max for a 25 first. I'm not sure why he would say no. Other than the
Right.
fact that he has, like you said, Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. But then go get Josh Downs in a sec. Whatever.
Oh, he
We
has
spent too
Josh
much
Downs.
time on this
I don't
trade.
know
It's
who it
giving
was,
me
but
an
yeah,
aneurysm.
like it's just a way. But my point I was trying to make though is like if everyone is truly not valuing Michael Pittman in that first round pick viewpoint, then that means a lot of other guys that are like that. That it also makes it warranted that for Dan, then potentially, well, shit, I can go buy all of those other guys that are Michael Pittman esque for less than a first or a first, and now I can
Right.
go buy my roster again. And like
I think
he might, that's where if he's gonna win. I don't want to make a bet on it because Dan's gonna say bet me, and I'm gonna say no. But my bet would be is that Dan's not making most of those picks, even though I've told him make
Oh,
half. I don't
definitely
think
not.
he's going to, and I think that,
No shot.
or I put it this way: if he does, he's going to oversaturate his picks. He's going to miss some. He's going to drop wrong people, and he's not going to succeed in his rebuild. I wish he would, but I don't think he is with the way things are going right now. And so the caveat I think is going to happen is that a lot of the people are like going to get in this scramble of selling, but not many people have actually done that. It's really mostly been Dan. But whoever gets in the scramble mode of selling, he's going to go just buy him for a first and say, all right, this is my fucking team. Like, I don't know if it's Keenan this year. I don't know who's going to be the next year. But like, if DJ Moore gets older or Evans or Godwin or I'm running out of names, but like whoever those people are, the 26, 27,
AJ Brown.
and that manager now is getting like, oh shit, they're 28. Like, I really want a first for this guy, and I'm not seeing a lot of 28-year-olds go for a first in our league. Dan's like, I'll pay first. It's
You're
just
right,
like,
actually.
and that's his fucking team. And I think that might be what happens next year. And I think that if he does that, I think he actually will do well for 2 seasons. Then he might be fucked. I don't know.
We'll see.
But
He only has 5 future firsts. It's not like he's sitting on 12 firsts right now, you know?
I know he kept telling me that too. He's like, I got 5, and then I have like 7 seconds. And I was like, okay. Like,
Yeah, and we just saw what a second can buy you, which is like, unless he's buying from himself, he's not getting Michael Pittman caliber players for seconds.
I think he thinks that the same trade that you did with him one year, where you gave him like, I don't know, 3 seconds for a first or something like that, that he can just start like he's valuing. Okay, 7 seconds is worth 2. Like I got 9 seconds now. I got 3 firsts.
Well, he did hit on Rashee Rice and CJ Stroud in the second, so maybe he's
It's true.
a second round whisperer. I guess we'll see. All right, that's an hour and a half. It was a good episode. It was a great episode. It was a lot of fun talking through these teams. Hopefully, all of you managers out there take notes and try to play catch up, because you guys are. This was the bottom 6. The last 2 episodes were the 6 teams that missed playoffs this past year. So our next 3, we're going to go through the 3 that were bounced in the first round of playoffs. So I'm looking forward to going through those teams next. But yeah, with that, Dave, I'll cheers you one more time. I have 1 sip left. I've saved for the closing.
Oh, mine's all
video.
gone.
Oh,
Cheers.
okay. All right.
All right, buddy. Have a good night.